The prolonged U.S. China trade war is beginning to have a ripple effect on the two countries' large business firms. The U.S. has initiated a so-called tech Cold War by restricting or banning business transactions with China's IT giant Huawei, citing national security. This comes while the two economic superpowers' trade talks are still stuck in limbo. Today, we go in depth on the prospects of the U.S. China trade war that has now entered a new phase and its impact on the Korean economy. For that, Dr. Shin Sang-hyup, professor of Pan-Pacific International Studies at Kyung University, now joins us. Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you.
So America's IT giant Google has suspended its business with Huawei, and other U.S. tech firms, including Intel and Qualcomm, have also followed suit. Now, this, of course, follows the Trump administration's new executive order that blocks transactions that involve information or communications technology that, quote, poses an unacceptable risk to the national security of the U.S.
Right.
Why is President Trump going that far?
Well, as you know very well, the trade negotiation between USA and China has been stopped. And right now there is a kind of some invisible competition between two countries in order to take the initiatives at the trade negotiation. So certainly the USA President, Mr. Trump, tried to give more pressure on the Chinese side by taking this decision. But if I give you more in-depth analysis about this question, there must be some differences in interpreting the situation, trade situation between two countries. USA has thought this is a part of the strategies governing the global affairs. So they want to take the initiatives at the competition with China in order to remain the #1 country governing the global affairs. So trade war certainly is a part of those kind of strategies for the United States government. But from the Chinese side, this is very important because they think this is the matter which is very important to maintaining the regime. Because very recently, President Xi Jinping said that they won't change their policy because of the intervention of the other countries. Even though they are very superpower country, they want to keep their policy, they want to keep their independence in implementing their policies. So there must be some conflicts between the stance between two countries regarding trade negotiation.
Huawei founder Ren Zhengfei has downplayed Trump's clampdown, saying that the U.S. is underestimating Huawei's strength and that Huawei has already made preparations for U.S. restrictions.
Right.
But how much do you think Huawei will be hurt by these restrictions?
To answer your question, I think I have to explain the responses from the European countries toward the Mr. Trump's decision. The American the companies announced they will stop the business with the Huawei, but according to the report, European companies, the German company or the other European companies, said that they will continue the business with Huawei. So I think this is one of the very important factors which we can guess. The damages which Huawei will get from the Mr. Trump's decision would be very limited. And another thing which I want to emphasize is that, Chinese government and Chinese industries have announced that they have prepared for those kind of situations. We cannot verify their statement. However, they said they have 3 months stocks of the components which are very important for the Huawei the business activities. So considering all of those kind of things, there must be some negative impact on the Chinese side. However, the impact could be quite limited, less than the gas we have caused by the Mr. Trump's decision against China.
The Trump administration's attack on Huawei could also negatively affect U.S. firms, with many reports suggesting that the U.S. firms are now reeling from uncertainties of being locked out of the Chinese market. How are the American companies taking the move?
Well, when you just consider number of items which could be the subject to 25% very high tariff rates, because when the USA government decided to impose 25% tariffs on already $200 billion worth Chinese products, plus they do not yet impose, but they are ready to impose the 25% tariffs on $325 billion worth Chinese products. In terms of those number of items or value of the products which could be subject to 25% tariffs imposed by the USA government is much bigger than the Chinese government can take the 25% imposed on imported American products. But I want to emphasize this one. China has some way to retaliate the American decision. Let me give you an example. China holds 90% of the global rare earth metals, which is very important. I mean, without this one, they cannot produce any the semiconductor chips or consumer electric products. So this is one of the most important resources for the IT industry or technology-intensive industries. But as I said before, China has more than 90% resources of the metals. So certainly if China, even according to the report, they consider stop exports the metals to the USA, that can be a fatal blow in some sense to the USA industry. So at the moment, it looks, China will have heavier damages than USA, but if the situation goes on, certainly both sides will get huge damages in their business activities, I think.
Now, the U.S. Commerce Department has eased restrictions on Huawei, announcing on Monday that it'll allow Huawei to buy American-made products for 90 days in order to maintain existing networks and provide software updates to existing Huawei handsets. What does this move imply?
Yes, Huawei actually became the second the supplier of the mobile phones in the global market, more than the Apple. They accounted for 17.9% market share in the first quarter of 2019, which was higher than Apple. Apple accounted for only 13%, which means that there are many American consumers using the mobile phone made by Huawei. So if USA government stop the imports of supplying the components to the Huawei, that means the USA consumers could get the inconvenience because of the USA government. That means that they will complain about the government decision. This is one of the reasons, and the more important thing is actually when Mr. Trump announced their decision, there was some reaction, immediate reaction from the Chinese market. Chinese consumers said that, they even consider launch the campaign not to buy American products, particularly Apple. And then, as I already explained, the Chinese government even consider to stop exports of the global rare earth metals. That means that, on the part of USA, it can be a kind of some burden, So I think they want to keep some rooms to be adjusted by the two governments, depending on the situation.
So we could say, on top of all those factors, the U.S. may be stepping back a little.
Yes.
Some point out that the tech war between the U.S. and China could be an opportunity for Korea. What kind of effect would the tech Cold War have on the Korean firms?
Well, it is very difficult to tell. What kind of advantages or disadvantages Korean companies could have from the trade war between two countries. The reason why, because some people said that we could have some opportunities to export more products, our products to China, because Chinese, Huawei wants to, should have to use the components made by other countries, such as Korea or other European countries. But the problem we have to concern about is that, we have maintained very close relations with the USA. not only in the business but also in the security issues. So, I mean, unlike the European countries, if USA asks Korean government not to trade, export those components to China, it could be possible, isn't it? So if it happens, certainly we could not get any opportunities to export our components to the Huawei. Another one is actually because of the trade war, the Korean financial market could get the disadvantages. The Korean currency value against the USA dollar will be affected. That means that, as you know very well, over the last several months, the one currency, currency value one, devaluated very dramatically, which means, well, on the short-term basis, I think it could be a positive factor to the Korean exports. But look at the situation right now. The Korean export has been reduced over the last several months. More specifically speaking, since the last December, Korean export has been reduced. In such a kind of situation, the devaluation of the currency value against the USA dollar could not be a very positive factor, because but it can be a rather negative factor on the Korean financial market. Why? Because foreign investors want to sell their stocks which they purchased in the Korean stock market. Why? Because devaluation of a Korean currency against the USA dollar, they should have to immediately sell their stocks because they change the Korean currency into USA dollar. So if the currency devalued, then they should buy the USA dollar with more Korean currency. So the many foreign investors want to sell the Korean stock market at the Korean stock market, Korean stock market, then oversupply of the Korean currency, but reduce the USA dollar in the market. That means there could be more possible of the devaluation of the Korean currency against the USA dollar. It can be one of the direct factors affecting Korean consumers. They refrain from purchasing more goods. And the second one is Korean companies consider not to make investment, which is that these are two very important things for the economic growth. So on the part of the Korean and the government, excessive devaluation of the Korean currency against USA dollar could be a negative factor at the moment.
So Korea's finance minister Hong Nam-gi yesterday said that the impact of U.S. China trade war could be bigger than expected. Do you think we need government-level measures to mitigate the fallout?
Of course, because that, every country, I dare to say every country's government should control, make every effort to keep the appropriate value of their currency against key international currencies. As I already explained, the currency value of the countries directly affect the competitiveness of their exports. So to maintain or approve the value of their currency against the key international currencies such as USA dollar or euro, Japanese yen, it is very important. The situation we are facing right now is in Korea. As you know, it was too fastly devaluated the Korean currency against the USA dollar. So without intervention of the Korean government in FX market and foreign exchange market, Korean exports will face more difficulties. A few days ago, the Vice Prime Minister Hong announced that the government is ready to intervene in foreign exchange market. After that, the Korean currency value against the US dollar was rebounded a little bit. So this is one proof showing how the exchange market responded to the government, the policy, intervention.
How do you forecast the trade war or the tech war between the U.S. and China to go on from this point on? Do you expect some more retaliation from China?
Regretfully, I think so. There must be some escalation between two governments. And very recently, President Xi Jinping gave a speech to 52 leaders came from Africa and other developing countries. I think after this speech, I think the Chinese government does not have many rooms to take back. They want to keep their face, particularly to the Chinese people. in order to change their policy, stance toward trade negotiation with the USA government, they need some reasons. But I think to get those appropriate reasons to change their stance, it seems to be very difficult. That means Chinese government will keep their stance, current stance, quite a long time. How about U.S. responses? How about U.S. stances about trade war with China? That definitely USA President Mr. Trump have emphasized that and they will fix unfair trading practices which Chinese government has conducted, and they have emphasized this kind of things. And they also, as I already explained, this is a part of their strategies governing the global affairs. They want to maintain the hegemonic power in the global affairs. So, for a time being, both governments will have difficulties in changing their stance toward trade negotiation, trade war. So without changing their stance, I think it will be very difficult to finish the trade negotiation. And then I think that maybe USA should change a little bit more, because if they change a little bit more, Chinese government will get some logic needed to change their stance toward trade war with the United States. Without changing the, even whether it's a small one or big one, from the USA side, I think it will be extremely difficult for us to expect the end of the peaceful end of the trade war between two economic giants, I think.
All right, Dr. Shin, thank you so much for your insights tonight.
My pleasure.
And that does it for this edition of News in Depth. From all of us here at Arirang, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you right back here, same time.